Aloha, everyone, to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle, sponsored by the Still and Moving Center in Honolulu, and co-sponsored today for the first time by the Institute of World Culture in Santa Barbara, California. Today, in honor of Gandhiji's birthday, which will happen tomorrow, October 2nd, which is probably already occurring in India now, come to think of it. We are taking up the topic of Sarvodaya, the uplift of all but the least first. And we are so immensely privileged to have somebody who lives that practice of Sarvodaya. And this is Dr. Prakash Tyagi. He is the head of Gravis, a nonprofit on the Thar Desert of India in Jodhpur, actually. He is taking up as his life work the organization that his parents founded, coming to Rajasthan from a different part of India and making it their home for the rest of their lives. And Prakash is ably stepping into their very large footsteps. Our daughter, Cliff and my daughter, had the chance to serve as an intern there at Gravis. I think it was about 14 years ago, and she's not able to join us today. So I did ask her. She says, sends your big namaste, Prakashji. And I asked her, Sandhya, what would you say about Prakash? Were you here to introduce him? And she said, I would talk about him as a gentle and devoted servant to the people. And I would tell everyone how much good is done for some of the very poorest of the poor. She got a chance on some of these marches that they would do through the different villages to see how much was being done for the women and girls through increased education, through things like water collection, so that the girls would be able to collect water much closer to their homes, so that they would actually be able to attend the schools that have been set up for them. Also, just the way that women are supported through their pregnancies, that the infant mortality rate has gone down. As a medical doctor himself, one of Prakash's huge contributions to the area is setting up of hospitals. So I could go on, and instead I think that what I want to do is ask for 2 readings to be done, and then we're going to hand it over to Dr. Tyagi. So Mary, could you give us our reading from the back of the Still and Moving Center Almanac? And this is our year of being truly human. And so the back cover, if you could read that for us. We do this every week at GEMS.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Conscious endeavor. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and to paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do, to affect the quality of the day. That is the highest of arts. Henry David Thoreau.
And Jerry Lewin, may I ask you, from the aims of the Institute of World Culture, to read us the 10th aim, please.
And would you like the one on nonviolence as well? number 9?
Yeah, let's do 9 and 10.
Pretty good for tonight.
Yeah.
To assist in the emergence of men and women of universal culture, capable of continuous growth in nonviolence of mind, generosity of heart, and harmony of soul. And the 10th is to promote universal brotherhood and to foster human fellowship among all races, nations, and cultures.
You can see we're pretty well aligned with that. Those of you who have attended Gems from the Wisdom Traditions. So now, Dr. Prakash Tyagi, we'd love to hear about Sarvodaya.
Namaste, everyone. It's wonderful to connect with all of you. I'm connecting with you from Dominican Republic. As Renee said, this is my first time here. It's a beautiful country, and it's great to be here, and it's great to be in this circle with all of you. I remember joining this circle, many of you, some time ago, several months ago, when I had talked about importance of prayers in our work, in our life. And today it's my great privilege to remember Mahatma Gandhi with all of you and the values of Sarvodaya, which is an important part of our work in India and of many organizations around the world. So where do I begin from? I'm sure many of you may have read about Sarvodaya. Many of you may have read about Gandhi's incredible life, the work that he did. But what is the history? So the history is that India, of course, was a British colony. And that was the time when Gandhi became a very popular mass leader. Tomorrow, 2nd of October, India already has 2nd of October. So 2nd of October is Gandhi's birthday. And he was born in 1869, 153 years ago. About 3 years ago, 150 years of his birth were celebrated in India in a very widespread manner, supported by the government, by many other organizations. But Gandhi, who was born in a very privileged family and got education, got good opportunities in life, went to the UK, to England to study law, became an attorney, started doing legal practice in South Africa. And that's where he was transformed. Till then, Gandhi was a very shy, a very introvert kind of a person who was very afraid of speaking publicly, who was very afraid of expressing himself, was very private, so to speak. But then when he saw the injustice which was happening in South Africa in the name of race, in the name of color, in the name of social classes, something triggered him. And overnight, he was transformed from an individual human, from an ordinary human being to an extraordinary leader. And that was the social and political birth of Gandhi towards the end of the 19th century. After that, Gandhi worked in South Africa for several years, but eventually he realized problems that he was witnessing in South Africa are in greater proportions in India, which was also a British colony at that time, with discrimination, injustice happening in India. And he decided that it's time to go home and to work for the underprivileged classes of India, to work for India's independence, to work against the injustice which was happening. So in the beginning of the 20th century, Gandhi then moved to India as a rather young attorney, a rather young man, to fight for India's freedom struggle, to fight for India's causes. So at this very time, the principles of Sarvodaya were also circulating in his mind. John Ruskin was a philosopher who had great influence on Gandhi's thinking, on Gandhi's ideology. And with his written work, Gandhi gave birth to Sarvodaya ideology in the beginning of the 20th century. Sarvodaya, which is a Hindi word, actually a Sanskrit word, it's translated into all rising or universal upliftment or progress for all or welfare for everybody. That's what Sarvodaya means. Within Gandhi's life, because he was the creator, he was the originator of this idea, of this philosophy, Sarvodaya was used to support India's freedom fight, India's struggle for independence initially. And this was against discrimination, against injustice, against inequities and inequalities that were there. And gradually, the movement of Sarvodaya became very nationalized across India. And then, of course, in 1947, India became independent. The colonial rule was over. The British left India. And Gandhi was considered to be the main contributor, the biggest hero of the independence struggle, of the independence fight. Unfortunately, Gandhi was assassinated only a few months after India's independence by a Hindu fanatic in 1948. But then the principles, the ideas of Sarvodaya that he had brought into the picture for this particular period of about 35 years when he was very active in India's independence struggle, continued to be the foundation of community development, of national programs moving forward. Sarvodaya has many concepts within it. One of the most important concepts of Sarvodaya is Gram Swaraj, a Hindi word, which translates into village self-rule. Gandhi and the thinkers of Sarvodaya had believed that villages, which are basically a demographic unit, right? In India, it's more common because it's a very rural country, but it would be relevant to any country in the world, the kind of units they have. And his idea was that these populations living in villages or in slums or in small areas, they should have full control on their lives. They should, of course, follow the laws and regulations of the country, of the land, but they should have self-authority. They should have independence, and they should have their own thinking about their community, about their life, about the kind of work that they want to do. So Gram Swaraj was extremely important. The other thing which is essential for Sarvodaya's existence is non-violence. The belief in truth and in harmony. Sarvodaya believes that if development is done, but if it is done at the cost of violence, if it is done at the cost of harming others, then it's not real development. Real development will be the only one which is going to be founded in non-violent principles, non-violent theories, with no harm caused to any human beings or to any living organisms or to the surrounding nature. So village self-rule, non-violence, and then thirdly, all forms of equality. It is extremely important that in Sarvodaya thinking, people of all different possible types of colors, of linguistic identities, of castes, which are extremely prevalent in India, the social classes, and also of different religions which exist. They must coexist. They must work with each other. They must live in a symbiotic relationship. And there has to be absolute equality on these differences. So these are the basic elements, basic components of Sarvodaya, which has been the strong force for many programs, for many developmental organizations in India and across the world. Gandhi, because we are remembering Gandhi on his birthday tomorrow, used the principles of Sarvodaya for fighting for India's independence fight, as I said, but also on a number of other social causes which were extremely problematic for India in the time when he was alive. An example was untouchability. Untouchability was such a big social problem for India for a long time. It still has not been eliminated completely. Although the law has eliminated it, but the social practices still have a room for it, which was not touching particular classes, particular caste groups, because they were considered to be of lower castes and they were considered to be untouchables. Gandhi used Sarvodaya very strongly to practice untouchability, which after India's independence became a law that all castes have to be treated equally. This is a very impromptu talk, Rini. So let me know when I need to finish. Do I have 5 more minutes or 10?
You do. And I'm hoping that you get to Gravis within that time.
Okay. So, so after India's independence, Sarvodaya led to birth of many development, many social organizations which work on this theory. There were many national level examples. One of the gentlemen who was considered to be the spiritual heir of Gandhi and of Sarvodaya ideology was known as Vinoba Bhave. Vinoba led many social movements in the country, including a very large land gift movement known as Bhudan in Hindi, which was started in 1951 and continued for several years. And in this movement, Vinoba was able to get over 5 million acres of land from richer people to be redistributed to poor people, which was massive. And a great example of Sarvodaya ideology, which believes in progress for all. Gravis, which was created by my wonderful parents, who are both no more. But they, in the 1960s, after getting university education, were very highly motivated, influenced by Sarvodaya, by Mahatma Gandhi's ideologies, and were very deeply committed and motivated to work for the underprivileged communities of India. In India, of course, poverty is huge. Large numbers of people are living underprivileged lives. That's how Gravis was born in around 1980 or so. It started working in a very difficult, very remote, very disconnected part of the country, the Thar Desert, which is one of the poorest regions of India. And Gravis practically applied the lessons, the theories of Sarvodaya in its work. Some of the important things that Gravis started working on as it started working with the communities were that it believed in total inclusion. All caste groups, all religions would be an important part of our work, would be an important stakeholder of our work, was our founding philosophy. And a greater emphasis was given on bringing the leaders from lower caste groups into forefront because their voices were typically not heard. They were marginalized, they were excluded, to make sure that they will be given central roles, to make sure that their voices will be heard, was an important part of Gravis' work. Secondly, gender was important to us because women and girls live secondary lives, underprivileged lives, confined lives with limited decision-making powers, with very limited literacy levels. So Gravis wanted to make sure that women and girls will be in equal roles, in equal capacities as we work with the communities. And they were brought forward, and a number of programs were designed and implemented to make sure that they are empowered. Thirdly, a lot of emphasis in our work was given and is being given on natural resource management, on environment, on ecology, because we believe that in order to be sustainable, in order to be judicious to our environment, in order to be future thinking, it's important that we work on climate, on environment, on protecting what the God has given us. And therefore, the work that we do on water security, on food security, on climate change is very directly focused on that. Gravis works in approximately 1,500 villages currently, covering more than 1.5 million people as a population, which sounds quite large, but since the area is very large, it still is a very small number, and we hope that we grow further. We have been doing some very, very important work in the domains of water security and food security, so that rainwater can be harvested, food can be cultivated by farmers, and then our work also spreads into the areas of education for girls, with more greater emphasis, health and nutrition, providing medical services and running public health interventions, and then work for the communities directly, the community mobilization component, which is raising awareness, making the communities a very direct partners in our programs, and their overall training and capacity building so that they can leverage with other programs, other resources as well beyond Gravis. The work that we have done with the inspiration of Gandhi's life, with the inspiration of Sarvodaya ideology, has been extremely successful. We have come a long way, but we also need to travel a long way. We need to go far to reach more people. And we thank all our partners, all our supporters who have been co-travelers in this journey. And I'll just conclude by saying maybe a couple of more sentences, and then we'll take a pause. I think the work that Mahatma Gandhi and Sarvodaya did in India is very similar to what Martin Luther King did in the US or what Nelson Mandela did in South Africa. So while this may sound like a Sanskrit, a Hindi word, it has global implications. It has global relevance. And I believe that there are three major challenges that the humanity is facing in the 21st century. The first challenge would be ecological and environmental, which we are witnessing in the forms of climate change and nature and the disasters. The second would be socio-economic challenge, which is witnessed in the form of growing poverty, growing inequalities, And the third would be the demographic challenges in which we are seeing this world is getting population changes with more people living longer, population aging. So all these three types of challenges have to be combated. And Sarvodaya is an essential ideology to combat these challenges. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. So knowing that this is really something we consider to be a roundtable discussion, a roundtable conversation, we want to just make sure that as people raise questions that we're not always putting Prakash on the spot, that other people feel comfortable also chiming in. All right. Carolyn is the president of the Institute of World Culture, and we certainly are happy to entertain your comment or question, Carolyn.
Could you tell us more about the education of women you are promoting here and now? Do they go to local high schools and then you supplement it, or do you create special schools? Or obviously this is a big issue in other countries. Is there substantial resistance to educating women?
Girls' education is a very significant challenge. There have been social obstacles, which was the lack of willingness to send these girls to schools with a thinking that what is the need? What will happen if they go to schools? Eventually, they have to be at homes. Eventually, they have to give birth to children. Eventually, they have to do domestic chores. So then why send girls to schools was the philosophy, was the thinking. So it took us a long time, a crusade to convince people, to convince parents, to convince communities that they are equal partners in life with men. Men need education, women do as well. They have to be confident, they have to be independent, they have to lead their own lives. So one aspect was this convincing, this motivation, this atmosphere building. The second part of the problem was that the girls couldn't go to schools because they had many roles to play, which requires time, which requires physical energy. And the most important thing was water fetching drudgery. Water is not available, water is at distance, water is far, and it's a very feminine role in India and in many parts of the world to bring water. It's not considered to be a masculine duty. So many girls would spend hours and hours every day to go to fetch water, and that would prevent them from going to schools. So Gravis has been working very comprehensively to first of all, to eliminate the social myths, to improve the mindsets, and then secondly, to create facilities for girls like water harvesting structures, which would provide water in their homes and which would then allow the girls to have time and to go to schools. When we started working some 35 to 40 years ago, the ratio of girls in the schools was very, very limited. It was approximately 2% girls compared to 98% boys. But now we have come to a stage where the ratio is reaching the half point, half boys and half girls in schools, which is wonderful. Educated girls will be educated women of tomorrow, and that will lead to more transformed societies.
Jerry?
Yes, I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more also about how you're approaching the problem of malnutrition.
Malnutrition is a very severe problem because where we work is a desert, also known as the Thar Desert. The rainfalls are extremely limited, and therefore, first of all, there is a very severe water scarcity, leading to very limited drinking water resources available. But of course, because of lack of rains, the agricultural productions are insufficient, and therefore the crops, the food, both the staple crops as well as fruits and vegetables are available in very limited quantities. The poverty is very deep rooted, and therefore for people to buy things if they are not produced in their own communities from markets is almost impossible. So there are many problems, and malnutrition therefore is significant. The malnutrition is more prevalent in women and girls because of the social reasons, and also in children. Gravis work has very strong focuses on water security and food security. Drought mitigation is an important component of our work. And when we work on water security and food security, we very directly address malnutrition because water leads to, first of all, to nutrition itself, because water is a nutrient for human body, as well as more water leads to greater agricultural production, more crops, more staple crops, which people can consume. And Gravis has also been working, apart from the staple crops, which are things like millet and wheat, which are more common in our area. We have also been working on arid horticulture, and arid horticulture looks at cultivation of desert-friendly fruits and vegetables, which are very hard to find. And these fruits and vegetables provide nutrition in the form of micronutrients. Vitamins and other micronutrients are available in these fruits and vegetables. So there is a lot of effort on water and food security work, but there is also a lot of focus on training and capacity building, because nutrition awareness, the understanding of nutrition, what is a good diet, what are the components of good diet, what should be consumed in what quantities is also not known to people. So it's extremely important that we run educational activities. Gravis is also an organization which has a full-fledged healthcare program. We run both medical services and public health interventions. So therefore, apart from our food security, water security, and education program, we also have direct health services which cater to nutrition. And that's how we are looking at nutrition as a public health problem.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you. Dana?
You mentioned the Nova Bhave and the Buddhan movement, and I was wondering if, just in your thoughts, you had any lessons that could be shared, or ideas about how the principles and practices of that movement could help us today with resource sharing.
Can this question be repeated? Because the voice was a bit low.
I'll try to speak louder. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering if in your experience, or just, yes, your experience, you had ever thought about or have any thoughts about lessons that could be learned or shared that came out of the Buddhan movement that have to do with resource sharing, something that's really at odds in the world today.
Yes, that's a great question. Vinoba, the man who led Bhudan movement, was quite a charismatic person. He traveled the whole country by feet over a span of more than 10 years. And he was able to collect more than 5 million acres of land to be redistributed to poorer people. And he had this great ability to convince people that they should be donating whatever is access for them, whatever is they believe can be donated. I think if the world follows this idea, if the world follows this principle, there will be a lot of happiness, a lot of welfare, because a lot of people are living in abject, deep-rooted poverty, completely deprived of basic resources. And then there are people who are living in great abundance with a lot of wealth. And there are some examples of people willing to donate. There are some examples of people running charitable causes, but the number is small. The world has become more unequal, more inequitable in the last 50 years when Bhudan took place in 1950s and 1960s. In India as well, which is a poorer country, by all means, the disparities are growing very rapidly. The rich are becoming richer and the poor are becoming poorer. So we need to have many Bhudan movements to bridge the gap. And this distance between rich and poor has become even bigger post-COVID, post-pandemic. In India, I believe in the US as well. And therefore, Gravis is an organization which has been working for the upliftment of poor people. Our focus when we run a program, be it on food security, be it on water security, be it on education, be it on nutrition, specifically focusing on some of the questions that have been asked, we try to go to the most needy people in the communities. We try to work for the most underprivileged, the poorest people, because they are the one who need it the most. I'm optimistic, I'm confident, and I'm hopeful that Gravis and many other organizations will continue focusing on Sarvodaya and on reaching out to the most needy and most poor people with the thinking that the needy people need more support and that we can share our resources. It's all about sharing and caring.
Yeah. Prakash, before I call on Maurice, what I've heard that Vinova Bhave would do is he would go to some of the wealthier landowners and say something like, so you have 4 sons that you plan on giving your land to. Why don't you consider me your 5th son and give a 5th of your land to me that now I could give to the poor, maybe even in your area. Is that a correct kind of approximation of the kind of things he would say? Make it very personal like that, the approach.
Yes, this is exactly what I have also heard. But apart from that, he was a very strong, charismatic leader. He was revered in the communities, he was revered in the people, and most importantly, he had the conviction, the dedication, and the time to spend for the cause. Bhudan did not happen overnight. Bhudan did not happen without making an effort. Bhudan did not happen without Vinoba traveling across the breadth and width of the country. He was prepared, he was willing to walk by feet, and walking by feet has a symbolic gesture, because he wanted to make sure that he would go to everyone, he would meet all wealthy, rich people, and the amount of land that he collected as a result of this exercise is quite unprecedented, quite historic, but he was able to touch that sentiment at that time. I'm not sure if there will be more leaders of that nature in future, in the present or in future, but he was definitely a very, very inspiring person.
And I'm also just wondering if there's something about that personal touch that maybe each of us could apply in our lives. And he did come from a wealthy family himself, and he walked around, I think, in a loincloth and sandals like Gandhiji, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And Gandhi, of course, is more known for his international connectivity, and Vinoba is less known. In this circle, we know him, but not many circles are aware of Vinoba. Vinoba was a very learned man. He never traveled outside India for numerous reasons. He lived in India, he died in India, but he had complete command on almost all major languages of the world. And he had gone through all religious books of all religions completely and thoroughly, be it Bible, be it Gita, be it Quran. So he was a very thoroughly educated, learned man. And Gandhi once called him his spiritual heir, his spiritual successor. I had a great privilege of meeting him once before he died. It was in the year 1982 or so, when I was about 10 years old. And I and my parents had visited him in his ashram, in his workplace in the state of Maharashtra in Western India. And I have faint memories of seeing him. And then after that, in 1982 or so, he had passed away. So a wonderful man, a remarkable leader, less known, but a wonderful contributor.
Maurice.
Yes, a few of us actually have had the privilege of going to his ashram, and it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited in the world. It just has a sparkling beauty and inspiration. It has a river nearby. It has some very ancient tombs. It's quite a place. I just wanted to ask, and thank you for being here again for us. And when you go into a community, of course, I would imagine you first listen to the people and what their needs are, maybe collect some information about the situation. Could you tell us a bit about how you deal with the local power structure, whether it's what is it called, the Palachaya, or the politicians, or in other words, do you find them pretty responsive to what Gravis wants to offer, or do you kind of have to work with them?
And particularly at the village or community level when Gravis goes in.
Gravis believes that village self-rule is critical to community development, to Sarvodaya. We believe that people should be in full control and full authority of their decision-making processes. We believe that the political structures in a country, in a community like ours or in any other community should be there to govern, to have laws, to have some broad thinking, but people at the grassroots level, people at the decentralized level should be empowered, should have the authority, should be able to take a call, Gandhi, who was the thinker behind Sarvodaya, actually had believed that the political system should be completely decentralized and people should have the power to elect their representatives like we all do in the US or in India. But he had also believed that people should also have the power to reject the elected representatives by using referendums, by telling them that they are not their representatives if they are not following their interests or their causes. So in our philosophy, in our work, communities, community-based organizations have a very strong role. Their training, their capacity building is given a strong emphasis. And when we work on programs, when we work on the projects, we make sure that they are equal partners, their voices are heard, their voices are considered, which is happening in the communities and the work that we do. I'm not very sure about the political system, the political structure that India right now has, if that is adequately decentralized or not. On that front, I believe we need to do more work. But in our work, in our practices, which is of course a small scale, we are able to follow the ideology of community participation.
I believe, and maybe Cliff is going to comment on this too, that Sandhya, our daughter, had the chance of going to some of, I'm not sure how you say it, panchayat meetings with the villagers. And I think the word comes from the number 5, and there would be generally 5 people in this kind of community organization, you know, the kind of leaders of the community. And Gravis is making sure that more of the women are showing up in each of these panchayats. And that does make a difference in the whole power structure.
Sandhya had a very meaningful time with us a long time ago, about 10, 12 years ago. And she was able to witness how we participate, how we partner with the communities. I think be it the organizations like Gravis, which are devoted towards the communities, be it our governments, which are larger, but our political representation, not aliens, they need to make sure that the communities, they need to make sure that us, the people, are trusted, are partnered with. In our work, there is absolutely no possibility of doing programs without community consultations, without community partnerships. We treat them as very equal, very important partners, and therefore all the activities that we design, we implement, are thoroughly discussed, consulted with the communities. But not only the designing, the implementation and the monitoring also takes place in their partnership. So full participation of the communities. And that's why Gravis has been quite successful in the region of India where we work. If any of you happen to be there, you would see that the people trust us. People believe in our work, and people believe what we are doing is truly reflection of communities' feelings and perceptions.
Cliff.
Well, it's so wonderful to see you again, Prakash. Namaste. I guess my question is almost the same as Maurice's questions, but maybe if I phrase it in a different way, you can take it a little deeper. In that most nonprofits or NGOs, you know, they have really, really good intentions, they have really good motivations, but for some reason, it's hard for us to get out of ourselves, and we tend to impose our ideas, our approaches, our technologies on those that maybe we're trying to serve or to help. Whereas Sarvodaya, Gandhi's ideas of, you know, self-rule, Swaraj, and Swadeshi, self-reliance, And then the whole approach of Gravis is on empowerment. And it just seems so difficult how you go about empowering those that felt without power. I do remember going to a village with Sandhya, and you had some self-help, women's self-help groups and micro industries going on. But it sounds like also what Maurice is saying is there's probably a political power structure in these villages that's also resisting this empowerment of those that don't have power. Can you give some practical thoughts on how to do this Sarvodian empowerment process?
Yes, thank you, Cliff. My thought is that community development is a process that takes time. There cannot be express ways to develop the communities. There cannot be express ways to permanently solve the problems. And therefore, a long-term vision, a long-term thinking is required. And that's what Gravis has. And also patience is required. In some of the technologies in the tech world that we are living in, it is probably possible to achieve things very quickly. Some apps, some technological solutions, but that's not what the community needs are. That's not what the change that we are looking at it is. And if the change happens quickly, if the change happens without going through the process, if the change happens without facing the hardships, then I believe the change is not sustainable. I believe the change is not real. And if the change happens after time consumed, if the change happens after challenges faced, if the change happens with a long-term mindset, then the change sustains. Gravis as an organization is very prepared, very committed to spend that time to face those challenges. When we work with self-help groups, for example, that you were referring to, or with other forms of community-based organizations like development committees, conflicts may arise, people may disagree, people may have disagreements with each other, there may be lack of solidarity, there may be delayed responses of communities, but all of that has to be embraced. All of that has to be welcomed. All of that has to be taken positively. One of the positive things about Gravis is it's not an organization which is focused on a project mode for 3 years or 5 years. We are there in the communities. We are going to be there in the communities. We have a permanent presence. We have human resources. We have local connectivity, and we are going to solve the problems as they come by. Because we don't have a finite time in mind. We have to go on, we have to move on. And that's what we are doing. And that's what I think is extremely important in Sarvodaya ideology. And that's critical in trust building processes in human development anywhere. I have been privileged to travel to a few other parts of the world where we have supported the programs or where we have gone to learn the programs, and be it India, be it Africa, be it parts of Latin America, those processes, those efforts which are required for trust building are extremely critical. So we are happy that we are doing it. We are happy that you were able to say it. And every day we make progress on that.
You know, I'm reminded of something that is happening here in Hawaii. And those of you who are elsewhere in the world, maybe you have knowledge of similar situations near where you live. The Native Hawaiians were wayfarers. They traveled a lot and very, very great distance, and they used the stars to navigate. And they were very, very and continue to be very, very attuned to the natural phenomenon and very respectful of it. We are now in a situation where there's a proposal to build one of the most powerful telescopes in the world on one of the most ideal locations for looking out in space, and that's on the island of Hawaii. And it has been really vehemently opposed by Native Hawaiians. And I'm just wondering if the kind of steps that you are talking about, Prakash, had been used from the very beginning of talking about building such a telescope. And, you know, yes, talking about what the advantages to Hawaii would be in terms of, you know, financially giving people jobs and status-wise being a part of the scientific community, but also listening from the Hawaiian local perspective of what the impact was to them and what the location meant to them as a sacred mountain where it was going to be put. I just wonder if the outcome could have been different had the means by which the decision-making was done had been more inclusive. And so that's a kind of looking backwards. And I wonder if you have examples of times when people are at an impasse like that, things weren't done right to begin with, but then things were somehow rectified, that they did go back to the people and then they could reach consensus and weren't in this kind of deadlocked position.
I think consensus building is critical. And consensus building takes time, as I was reflecting to the last question before this. But just because it may take time, just because it may take effort, it cannot be bypassed. It has to be taken up. My idea might be a great idea, but unless it becomes acceptable to everyone who's a stakeholder, it's not a great idea. And that's the difference between individual wisdom and collective wisdom. And Sarvodaya believes in collective wisdom. Gravis works in the belief of collective wisdom because we believe that no one individually is wiser than collectively all are. And therefore collective wisdom is important. Consensus building has many obstacles, many challenges. We have numerous examples in which a particular program, a particular intervention, a particular activity, for example, a water body which is large or a forest which is large, which affects many lives, many families, many communities, and therefore the consensus is required. So we have many examples in which such activities were delayed because there was not a consensus, there was not a common ground. But we were willing to spend time, we were willing to talk to people, we were willing to bridge the gaps and to bring people on the same page. Because if consensus is not built, if a decision is forced, it will not last, it will not sustain, it will not have the same outcomes, it will not be fruitful. And therefore, we always believe that all the processes must be followed, all the discussions must take place. If lack of consensus delays the progress, it's better than speeding up the progress with disagreements.
And it is possible to go back and revisit things again and again, it sounds like. just the fact that it seems like it's at a standstill doesn't mean it has to remain that way. If people are willing to engage in the process. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, working with the communities, working in partnerships with the people, there is always a room for recorrection. There is always a room for course correction. There is always a room for having more dialogues. And that's how the transparent relationships with the communities should be and are. And we are very experienced of having those course corrections multiple times in our programs when we go back to people, have dialogue and change things as we wish.
Prakash, is there any question that you have for us or any suggestion that you have? You're speaking to a group of fairly privileged people, I would say. I mean, just the fact that we each have a computer that we can sit at and internet service and the time to be able to join each other here. Do you have any recommendations or questions for us?
A couple of things. I think the future of humanity depends on cross-cultural bridges. And this is a cross-cultural bridge where I come from a different part of the world, from a different community, and yet we are here together on common grounds, agreeing on most things, not on everything, but on most things. And disagreements, by the way, are as beautiful as agreements are. If there would be no disagreements, then there would be no life. But cross-cultural bridges to me are extremely important, and the humanity will go far and further as long as these cross-cultural bridges exist and flourish. So thank you for having these dialogues, and exchanges will be wonderful. And secondly, I do want to remind all of us, because tomorrow is Gandhi's birthday, and Gandhi had once said that for the millions of starving men and women, God appears in the form of food. That's the kind of poverty which had existed at that time. That is the kind of poverty which exists even today. So therefore, there is a need to work. Therefore, there is a need to feed people, not necessarily by food only, but by multiple ingredients that they would need. So what we are doing is extremely important in India. We are also thankful to the support that comes to us. And we also want you to see it if you are in India, if you are traveling in that area. Our doors are absolutely wide open for you to come and see what we do. So those are a couple of thoughts that came to my mind, Rimi, but
Yeah.
That's it from my side.
I know I didn't talk to you about this in advance, but you have a nonprofit set up that can accept American donations, that it doesn't have the name Gravis. Is there a way that you could put that in the chat, or maybe send it to Kevin and he could send it out?
Yes, I can send that information to Kevin by email.
Okay.
We can receive donations, assistance from the US or from other countries. I can provide that email information.
Yeah. Cliff and I have been really astounded getting reports from Gravis on the how much an American dollar can purchase in India. I mean, it's really phenomenal, and not very much can feed so many people for a long time. So it is quite remarkable how far what it wouldn't be, you know, very much out of our pocket would go a long way. And then, of course, we all have local efforts that need our attention as well. And, you know, we have our own forms of Sarvodaya that we need to attend to in our own communities to help lift up the least. And I know that the Institute of World Culture also, we're so grateful to be in a kind of brother-sister stance right now and supporting this particular conversation. And the Institute of World Culture is certainly doing those cross-cultural bridges that you're talking about, Prakash, and the awareness of the needs of one another and the strengths of one another seem to be really, really important.
Do you have visitors from other countries, from the Middle East or other parts of Asia? Do you have that come and want to see what you're doing and study your some of the principles that you've given us? I'm just curious if there's, and for that matter, how widespread in India is there some consciousness about what you're trying to do and your principles and all?
Yes, absolutely, Caroline. We have received many visitors from different parts of the world in the past. Cliff and Renee's daughter, Sandhya, spent several months with us several years ago. And like Sandhya, many other visitors, students, researchers have come and seen our work. We are very welcoming. We are very fond of the cross-cultural bridges, as I have been saying. It's extremely rewarding for us to have someone from a different culture, from a different perspective, coming and seeing our work and contributing in some ways, because we all learn from each other. So we are very open to that. COVID has been a bit of a problem in international traffic. And for some time, everything was stopped. People were not able to come. But luckily, things are kind of going back to some sort of normal. And so therefore, some people have started coming back and more people will come. But we like that, and we want more visitors, more people to come, see, co-create, contribute, construct things with us. That's our ideology.
Well, Prakash, as usual, we learn so much and expand our minds and our hearts when we hear you speak about your experience and the wonderful work that Gravas has done and is doing. And it would be remiss of me not to give two thanks. The first thank you is to your family and to Sandhya Tillotson, who arranged a hands-on Gandhian retreat in Santa Barbara with the Institute of World Culture, where for 5 days we actually acted as members of a Gandhian ashram, including bread labor, physical labor, including developing a maze, a religious maze at La Casa de Maria. And we're so grateful both to Sandhya and to your mother, Prakash Tyagi, who was the retreat leader. So thank you so much for completing that circle and your mother coming to Santa Barbara. We very much appreciate that. And then secondly, of course, we've appreciated your talk today, because it is a special day being at the edge of Gandhi's birthday. And it gives us that extra vision, that extra inspiration. And we feel through you and through our own reflections, the impact of people like Mahatma Gandhi and the Noble Bhave, who had such moral courage and such humanity to go and empower people. And you provided that wonderful bridge between that inspiration and the practical empowerment and the practical energy and effort that's needed to uplift each and all in Sarvodaya. So on behalf of both GEMS and the Institute of World Culture, past and present, I would like to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with us today.